Hello and welcome again to another program of Searching for Answers, a program designed to help you, the viewer, as well as all of us here on the panel. On my right is
John Jones, the School of Religion at La Sierra University.
And Michael Connect from Loma Linda University Medical Center in the Mission and Culture Department.
I'm Roy Branson, and I'm from the School of Religion at Loma Linda University.
We would invite our audience to get your Bibles, different versions of the Bible, anything that you have from Ellen White, Acts of the Apostles, or whatever. Also, I like Barclay. I don't know if you folks are acquainted with William Barclay. He's a wonderful interpreter of many of the things that we're all interested in the Bible. We're in the book of John, and last time we started with the first chapter. And I'm going to ask my good friend John Jones to give us a little bit of a review on the chapter. Was it 1.5 chapters?
Yes, hardly that,
like that,
actually. Yes. But we did get down through chapter 1 with its opening prologue, so beautifully crafted in these stately cadences, you know. In the beginning was the Word, some of the most famous language in the whole of the New Testament. And we worked our way down through that and to John the Baptist pointing out Jesus as the one whom he was not worthy to unloose the latches on his sandals. Jesus calling Philip and Nathaniel and Andrew, Cephas, Peter, all of the opening scenes of Jesus' ministry, getting things pulled together for all that follows in the subsequent 21 chapters. Then we turned our attention to that beautiful and famous story at the beginning of chapter 2, where Jesus attends a wedding. His mother's there. He comes along with his disciples. And we went over that, but you know, there are some things that we probably need to touch on and kind of
review a little
bit here. Those of you who are familiar with the story remember that there was a bit of a crisis. The beverage seemed to run a little low, and his mother whispers to Jesus, "They're running out of wine." As the story goes on and plays out, we see that the master of ceremonies is surprised, because ultimately what is being served, it may have been his duty to taste it first. We don't know. But what he is now supervising the placement before the guests turns out to be superior than not only than was served before, but anything he may have anticipated that these poor hardscrabble peasant people could afford. So he makes a bit of a complimentary joke out of it. You've saved the best wine until last. But there are several aspects about this story that tease us and pull us forward, aren't there? Beginning, if we want to make a quick historical little note, the early church fathers called John's gospel the spiritual gospel, because it's the one that most naturally has the sort of spiritual messages and lessons in it. And yet this gospel has more identifiable place names that we can actually spot in the Holy Land today than any of the other gospels. Starting with Cana, which is a bit of a puzzle to us. For years we have not known where Cana is. Today there are a couple of places that contend for that location. One is just near to Nazareth, about 6 kilometers, about 4 miles away. The other one is about 9 miles north of Nazareth. We're not sure which one is right today, but certainly one of those two seems to be. The bottom line here is that this is Jesus' neighborhood. This is kind of his stomping grounds where he has grown up. He knows people, they know him. So this is familiar territory.
So it's reasonable to think his mother was there.
Would be there, maybe helping out behind the scenes a little bit. Yeah.
It also says that Jesus' mother was there, and Jesus and his disciples had also been invited to the wedding. When the wine was gone, Jesus' mother said to him, "They have no more wine."
She whispered, probably.
Dear woman, why do you involve me? Jesus replied. my time has not yet come. Now, Roy, what does he mean, my time has not yet come?
Well, I think that what most people feel is that he's referring to his glorification,
Okay.
which we come to throughout the book, particularly towards the latter part of it. And of course, ultimately, it's the death, resurrection, and ascension.
Sure, sure.
And so probably what he's implying is, you want me to be pretty obvious and come on strong. My time isn't
I'm not ready
yet.
for that yet,
Yes.
he's saying. Is that right?
Right,
Is that what
It's
you
a-
think?
Yeah, it's an interesting statement, and what I've always find fascinating about it is you tend to think Jesus' mind is somewhere totally else.
Yeah.
He's thinking of something,
Yeah.
and his mother interrupts him, and I think what he's thinking of is that the future bride. He's thinking of a wedding that's to come with us someday.
Mm-hmm.
And he's
That's
saying,
a good point.
my time for that hasn't yet come.
Yes.
But he seems to have this train of thought, and because he was in my version it says "dear woman," but other versions it simply says "woman."
Yeah.
Mine
Why do you
says
involve
dear
me?
woman. It says mine does too.
Yeah. So but it's almost a rude statement.
Yeah, it did.
Yeah.
You don't understand it because dear woman. In other
Yeah.
words, mother.
Yeah.
You know, in the other Gospels, there's the story of the Syrophoenician woman.
Yeah.
And Jesus also kind of doesn't want to be responding to an appeal for a miracle. And,
Well, what about the fact that he didn't want to have a reputation of doing signs and wonders just yet because what did he have, 3.5 years? And he didn't want to get ahead of what he felt that he was supposed to do while he was here on earth.
what I think is interesting is both with the Syrophoenician woman and that story and Mary, the mother, is that ultimately the women get their way
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
Jesus.
Never thought of that.
Yeah.
In
Good
fact,
point.
In fact, particularly in John, this seems to be a pattern, doesn't it? Because you've got these great classic miracles carefully chosen and strung together here in John. And when you go through them, you find that each one of them has a little moment of resistance, hesitation, misdirection, something going on here. I won't take time to unpack that, but as we work our way through the fourth gospel, we'll see it. This may be part of the fourth evangelist, of the gospel writer's way of saying that Jesus operates by a different agenda. People come to him, the sisters, hurry, while Lazarus is still alive. The man at the pool of Bethsaida, help me get into the water, you know. And in every instance, Jesus has a different agenda. He operates by heaven's plan, not by human plans.
Exactly.
And I think that John is saying something about Jesus in the way that he does this. The expression in the original language, what is this to you or me or something like that, has had a lot of ink spilled on it over the years as scholars have published in journals their attempt to understand that expression. Literally, it's kind of cryptic. What to me, also to you. It's just 4 words in the Greek. And some have suggested that it may mean something like, whatever is mine is yours. That is to say, whatever resources I have, I place at your disposal.
Sure.
That's one possibility. Another could be speaking not about his recourse, but about Mary's concern. Whatever is a concern to you is also a concern to me.
Right.
I remember Dr. Litke years and years and years ago up at Walla Walla College sharing that interpretation with his Greek students, Walla Walla University now. But I think nonetheless that this is a bit of a pushback. This is a bit of a negative idea.
But the stories indicate that Jesus does adapt
Always.
to the people around him.
But
Yeah.
in new and
Yeah.
surprising ways that
That's
they didn't
true.
anticipate.
That's true.
Yeah.
I'm going to have you, if you don't mind, to start reading from verse 5, chapter 2, verse 5 in the book of John, and read on down to including verse 11.
Okay. His mother said to the servants, "Do whatever he tells you." Nearby stood 6 stone jars, the kind used by the Jews for ceremonial washing, each holding from 20 to 30 gallons. Jesus said to the servants, "Fill the jars with water." So they filled them to the brim. Then he told them, "Now draw some out and take it to the master of the banquet." They did so. The master of the banquet tasted the water that had been turned into wine. He did not realize where it had come from, though the servants who had drawn the water knew. Then he called the bridegroom aside and said, "Everyone brings out the choice wine first, and then the cheaper wine after the guests have had too much to drink. But you have saved the best till now." This, the first of his miraculous signs Jesus performed at Cana in Galilee. He thus revealed his glory, and his disciples put their faith in him.
Okay, Roy, I want to ask you, what do you mean he first revealed his glory? Would that be he first showed that he could work a miracle?
Well, isn't this part, following the prologue, and then up to where he really starts going to Jerusalem and staying there and so on. This is sometimes called a book of signs, because there's one sign after another, some miraculous, others non-miraculous, but still dramatic. And so these, I think, are a response to John, as he's portrayed in this book, as saying, what I do is worthwhile and important, but you will find other things that are greater that will be revealed to you. Well, this is the first on that journey, it seems to me.
Yeah.
Well, what I find is where it says in verse 11, this is the first of his miraculous signs, you have to wonder, why would his first miracle be for a catering disaster?
Exactly. That's a good point. I never thought of that.
Yeah, because this would be an embarrassment to the family that they've run out of this.
Yes.
And Jesus steps in, but I think there's a deeper statement there that Jesus is saying, and that is he provided this miracle, but he didn't take the credit. The credit was transferred to the family. And that's what we're going to learn more about Jesus that he does for us.
Now, you talked about chapter 1 earlier in this program, before the two of us were here. I wonder if it would be interesting to compare John the Baptist and water with Jesus and water.
All right.
Oh, yeah.
And it seems like what you see in John the Baptist, and he appears various times through this book, but he certainly has quite a role at the very beginning. He's out in the wilderness, he's austere, and it's kind of dark, and he's involved with water, he's baptizing. And here we come to water. And
what verse are we?
Verse 6 of chapter 2. Chapter 2, verse 6.
Okay.
And it's describing 6 stone water jars, the kind used by the Jews for ceremonial washing. Now, this is water that's a little bit like one of the functions of baptism, cleaning.
Oh, okay.
And of course, it's washing away sins with baptism, but here it's ceremonial washing. Which I take it is what every good Jew is supposed to do before they eat and so on.
Yeah.
Now, what I'm wondering is if it isn't interesting that you have these big containers, and they're very big, and they're for that kind of use of water. And what Jesus does is he makes wine out of it. John the Baptist, water, Jesus, wine. John the Baptist, cleaning. Jesus
celebrating.
Exactly. Exactly.
Good
it's more
point.
valuable. It's more fun. It's more sociable. And there's a contrast between two of God's men.
That's right. Good.
It has to do with worship style, finally, still today, doesn't it?
Yes.
Those of us who want to sing "A Mighty Fortress is Our God," and those who want to sing "Our God is an Awesome God," praise music. But that goes back to the earliest period of the first believers. We see the debate reflected in Luke as well, because there Jesus deliberately contrasts himself with John the Baptizer. In Luke chapter 7, he says, "What's the matter with this generation? If we're apocalyptic and forceful and thunder and lightning and brimstone like John the Baptist is, you say that's too strong medicine. Let's all go home and see what's on TV." Paraphrasing. But on the other hand, I come along and you say, look, party boy, which way do you want it? What's the matter? You're like children who in the marketplace who can't agree how to play. You want to play wedding, you want to play funeral, So I think that Jesus is saying there are people who are going to find a way of being fussy and critical about worship style either way, but ultimately he winds up saying wisdom is vindicated by all of her children on either side of this. Yeah, so there's value here. So Jesus is a deliberate counterpoint to John the Baptizer without condemning his way of being.
Right.
Okay.
I've also wondered if the jars that are there for ceremonial washing, which is the Jewish rituals, nothing wrong with that, represent for the Gospel of John Judaism. And the early Christian church was wrestling with their Jews in conflict within the Christian community with the Jews who were in the synagogue.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. It isn't that Jesus goes in and smashes these ceremonial jars.
Yeah.
But what he does is he makes something magnificent out of them that they were not made for.
Yes, that's right.
So it's Judaism plus. It's not Judaism being wiped away.
Yeah.
And that which does come later does turn out to be better after all. When you're dealing with a traditional society, of course, this is a problem because everybody wants to look back over their shoulder. Are you greater than our father Abraham? Are you greater than Moses? Well, the point is that the greater can come subsequently, not only back at the beginning again. So there is clear metaphoric meaning here, it seems to me.
Well, I'll tell you what, we've seen gentle Jesus, meek and mild. In the next few verses, we're going to say that he has changed his persona. Excuse me very much. May I read a few verses here? Beginning with chapter 2 in the book of John, starting with verse 12. After this, that is after the wedding, he went down to Capernaum. Is that Capernaum or Capernaum?
Here's the Greek scholar.
Well,
Either one's fine.
okay.
Capernaum.
Okay, okay. After this, he went down to Capernaum with his mother and brothers. And his brothers. Did you get that? The brothers. They were older than he was, right? Okay, so the brothers went along and his disciples. There they stayed for a few days. Don't you wonder where they stayed? Did they have just little hotels or little inns? But anyway, just a thought. When it was almost time for the Jewish Passover, Jesus went up to Jerusalem. In the temple courts, he found men selling cattle, sheep, doves, and others sitting at tables exchanging money. Now, remember, this is a very holy temple. Look at can you hear all the racket going on with all those animals? Now, the other thing I want to know, why would they have to change money? Now, from what I remember is because the Jews had a certain way of counting their coins, or it was a certain way, and the people had a different change, a different kind of change, and they would exchange money and cheat people. Did you ever read that? Or is it just me?
Well, whenever you have money changers, you've got opportunities
Yes,
for
that's
squeeze.
right. But they really did. Some of the poor people that came up didn't have the same kind of money as the Jews had.
Yeah.
Well, this was
So-
Roman Empire currency having to be exchanged for that of the old Hasmonean, the old priestly form. But yeah.
So he made a whip out of cords and drove them all from the temple area, both sheep and cattle. He scattered the coins of money changers and overturned their tables. To those who sold doves, he said, "Get these out of here. How dare you turn my Father's house into a market?" Is he being a little bit, is he overreacting a little bit here, Roy?
I don't think so. I think that
Gentle Jesus, meek and mild?
Right, and that's our problem,
Yeah.
not the Gospels.
Yeah.
I mean, we are heirs of 19th century pious art
Yeah.
of Jesus and Harry Anderson. You can't imagine a whip in a Harry Anderson
No.
Christ,
No.
in the hand of a Harry Anderson Christ. But I think that this is a prophet. This is someone who is not rejecting all of Judaism, but he is going to purify it.
Mm-hmm.
And
why did they listen to him? Whatever he looked at him, whatever he said, they were afraid.
well, I think because he did something that nobody else
Had ever called him on.
was doing.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. This is the only gospel, I think, where it says that he made a whip and used the whip.
Yeah.
And he drives he doesn't just overturn the money changers' desks. It says he drove all from the temple area, sheep and cattle. I mean, that takes a little work.
Yeah, can you imagine? Did you want to add a little bit to this?
Well, some people are bothered by anger or emotion, but for me, it just shows Jesus cares about something very passionate.
Yes.
There's something there that he really wants to take care of.
One of the things that I think that we ought to think about is that I think Jesus is reacting not to just a few people who are doing excessive things. He is reacting to the whole system at the heart of the Jewish country and
Yes,
state.
I
religious
understand what
state.
you're saying.
So this is a challenge to a whole system, not just to one or two money changers who are a little out of line on the porch.
They were cheating. They were acting in the synagogue or the temple in ways they shouldn't have been doing. And it's supposed to be a holy place. And I think Jesus did the right thing.
And I think that when we just read this, it indicates that the early Christian church, in its particular memory of this, is making a statement about the synagogues in the time of the early
That's
Christian
right.
church.
I think so too.
This is a commentary on Judaism after the time of Christ,
Right.
as much as what he did too.
Okay.
Of course, there were Jewish groups that were already fed up with all that was going on in the temple. Most
Is that
famously,
right?
the Essenes,
Yeah.
who
Oh,
had
yeah.
simply abandoned the whole thing, washed their hands of it, said, let's go back out in the desert where we all started and start over again out there. And as far
They
as we can
did,
tell, they
too.
did, yeah. So, but Jesus, rather than retreating, like John the Baptizer apparently
Right.
does, takes this whip and wades in. You know?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, would you continue reading? Start with verse 17
Yes.
in chapter 2 of the book of John.
His disciples remembered that it was written, "Zeal for your house will consume me." Then the Jews demanded of him, "What miraculous sign can you show us to prove your authority to do all this?" Jesus answered them, "Destroy this temple, and I will raise it again in 3 days." The Jews replied, "It has taken 46 years to build this temple, and are you going to raise it in 3 days?" But the temple he spoken of was his body. After he was raised from the dead, his disciples recalled what he had said. Then they believed the scripture and the words that Jesus had spoken. Now, while he was in Jerusalem at the Passover feast, many people saw the miraculous signs he was doing and believed in his name. But Jesus would not entrust himself to them, for he knew all men. He did not need man's testimony about man, for he knew what was in man.
That's very good, very good. I think that the thing that appeals to me here is that when he said this, I will destroy this temple and raise it in 3 days. And they said, well, it took us 46 years to build it. What are you talking about? Well, the disciples remembered it when he was in the grave for 3 days and then he rose. And it was another confirmation for the disciples that truly he was the Son of God.
Yeah.
Don't you think it's interesting how this gospel reveals some of the work of creating a narration, creating a gospel? I think more than the other gospels. Look here, verse 17. His disciples remembered that it is written.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It isn't just one person, but it's people remembering later. And then you come to the same thing.
22.
Yes, and verse 22, after he was raised from the dead, his disciples recalled what he had said. And I think that is a window into what is in fact a very, what shall we say, complex and rich process where the Christian church really gets involved in keeping the stories of Jesus alive.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's a kind of sanctified remembering, isn't it? That hooks back into the Hebrew Scriptures, the Old Testament. Remembers Jesus through those lenses. Zeal for your house is... What does that mean? Well, it's taken from Psalms, the 69th Psalm, which reflects, it was not written by David, but reflects the time of rebuilding the temple. And it took a while, and it was a hard job. So all of this is a way, I think, of the Christians making sense out of this puzzling figure to try to understand him through the Hebrew Scriptures.
Could I raise a possibility, and that is, if the memory also shaped, the memory of the Christian church shaped something like the story of Cana, in the sense that their worship services of celebrating the Lord's Supper,
We're happy.
yeah, we're happy, and it's in that kind of experience that they remember Cana.
When if I talk about today and the life that I'm living, the one thing I take out of these verses is I want to be able to remember these phrases from Jesus in my daily life. And whenever I hear and read these statements, I think, yes, there's times when his words come back to me. And I think there's something about reading the Bible, being immersed in it, so that those phrases come back as well to you.
Exactly. Now we have about 39 seconds left. And I just think that the reason I like this story is that you can apply it to our day and age. We can identify with it. And so I just think that it's wonderful that the Bible contains these things. When we read it, we think, oh yeah, I can understand that. And so I hope that our viewers have enjoyed this last segment and the fact that Jesus performed his first miracle at Cana. It gives us hope that he'll do a miracle for us someday. Thank you. This is Carolyn Thompson.